And welcome to the first of our three super exciting Prime Day coffee chats with our top US creators. My name is Maisie. I'm from the EU Amazon influencer team, and I'm going to be your host for this first session. As you've hopefully seen in the last few days, Prime Day is coming this July. It's 16th and 17th, so mark your calendars. So today we're going to be honing in on the best ways to prepare, how you can maximize your earnings during our largest sales event of the year. We're super lucky. We're joined over the next 90 minutes with three top performers from the US Amazon Influencer Program, and they're going to share with you their personal tips, tricks, and strategies on how they deliver successful Prime Days for themselves and their followers, and how you can implement the same for yourselves and your followers. So I'll start, before we get into the good stuff, I'll start with some housekeeping. So the format of the session is just going to be, it's 30 minutes. We're going to do a little coffee chat. It won't just be me speaking. You'll hear from Jill. The first 10 minutes will be discussing Prime Day, how content planning, how best practices, anything Jill wants to share here. And then we have 20 minutes of questions all about Prime Day that we've collected from you, our amazing EU Amazon influencers. So you'll hopefully get to hear some answers to some questions that you've submitted. For our very first webinar, we have the privilege of learning from Jill Comes Clean. Jill's a mom, wife, nurse, and former news reporter, and she's now a renowned influencer in the home and lifestyle space. And Jill, you've even got an audience exceeding 1 million followers across social media. So thanks so much for joining us. I was actually just tuning into your stories earlier, and I bought this toothbrush and toothpaste in one. I was like, my simple mind is blown. So Jill, I'm already a huge fan of yours and super lucky that we have you today.
Thank you. I am so honored to be asked to be here today and to share, all things Prime Day. It's such an exciting time of year. I was thinking today how it's like our Olympics, I feel like, with Amazon. And I was like, oh, Anna's an Olympic year. So this is perfect. So yes, I'm so excited. And the toothpaste toothbrush combo, brilliant. Yeah, that was just when I think I found everything on Amazon, I find something else. And I'm like, that is amazing.
I know, a game changer. Cool. Well, so you've been part of the Amazon Influencer Program. You're not a new joiner to this. So maybe you can tell us a bit about your journey so far with the program. And expand on that a little bit for our audience.
Yeah, so I've been with Amazon now, oh my gosh, it's probably going on 5 years, maybe more. It's wild because it feels like it's been no time at all. Like it's gone so fast. But yeah, several years now. I think this will be my fourth Prime Day, third or fourth. And it's just funny because Prime Day is such a game changer with your business, or it can be at least. And it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And it's so exhilarating too. But I love Amazon. It's been such a wonderful journey, and just the way that it's grown over the years, and the way that it's so easy to just work in to our business and our day-to-day life. I just love how streamlined they've made it. So it's been so fun.
Cool. And so then if you've seen a few Prime Days, then I'm guessing you've had quite a lot of experience with our sales events. So can you tell us maybe a bit more about Prime Day over the years and your experience? When I spoke to Cassandra, who we're going to speak to later, she was telling me that a few years ago, no one was talking about Prime Day, and now everyone's talking about Prime Day. So how have you found it in the last few years? How's it evolved for you?
Yes, she's so right. It has really built up, and it is now all anybody talks about. And it is the event that you see all the other retailers really compete with. And because it's all of a sudden you see this store having a sale, this one, you're like, wait, what? Oh, wait, they're trying to keep up with, Prime Day. But I just remember my first year doing it, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off. I didn't really have a plan down. And by the end of it, when I tell you I was spent, I felt like I ran 2 marathons back to back. It was crazy, but it was exhilarating, and it was so worth it. But I think having done it wild and crazy like that, then I'd be like, okay, what can I do? Let me take notes. So now for next year, I know do this, this, and this. So it's with every year you get a little more organized, just a little more better at putting it together. But there's still that element of like, it will just be a little chaotic because that's just the nature of sales. But I think there are things you can do to get yourself as most prepared as you can
No,
be.
super cool. And it's interesting to think about it as like a long game, right? That actually 365 days later, you're probably going to be in the same spot. So you might thank yourself for looking at your notes from last year.
Yes.
So that's good. Okay, now let's dive into like your content planning and best practice for Prime Day. So kind of in a like obviously as I found your toothbrush, but how do you kind of identify those products that you're going to promote to your audience over Prime Day? Like what strategies have you learned over the last few years to kind of hone in on those exact kind of products that are going to
So I
convert for
think
you?
I always start, Amazon will start sending the emails out, and like on their site, I think you can start to see like things that are on deal and all of that. But as you do it, I think you'll also start to know what your audience wants. And if you don't, I pull them. Like I pulled them last week with like on Instagram stories, a question box, or you could do this on Facebook or anywhere where you can get people to respond. But I'll say, like, what are you guys shopping for? What are you looking for? Because a lot of times there, people will suggest things that I maybe would not have thought to have shared because maybe it's not so much in my niche or my wheelhouse. But it's like I see a ton of people like, oh, we're looking for this. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to be a hot item, right? So I'll look for that. And I think you can start to figure too, maybe within your niche or even outside of it, but the things that people are going to want. Like for me, I do a lot of home items. I know people are going to want a robot vacuum. I know they're going to want a vac mop. So there's just those things, the higher price items too. A lot of times people, because they're wanting like obviously a deal on that. So I think keeping an eye out for that, but then also being aware of maybe what trends are coming up. So I know people might start shopping now for back to school or fall, because that's going to be here before we know it. So just keeping in mind those things and what people want, but asking them is really like the best thing, because that's where you get the best feedback.
No, that's super cool. I didn't even think about this. So then your strategy is kind of across then getting your audience feedback, those high ticket items where people are more likely to convert, and then your trusted kind of like audience top sellers, what they're buying like day in, day out. Oh, and then the trending items that you think are gonna come up. And so then when will you start to kind of engage with your audience around Prime Day? Like when do you are you already talking about it now? Like do you wait until the day before? Like what do you kind of do around that?
Yeah, it's a funny dance because it's like you don't want to burn them out by talking about it so much early, but you also want to create that excitement. So I feel like July 1st gave me that permission. Like, okay, it's 2 weeks from now. We can start talking about it. I'm still like warming them up and easing them into it, but I would say like I'm starting now, and maybe it's just something as simple as like on my Instagram stories, like I had already dropped the question box, or I might start saying, just like doing like a little poll of, how much are you guys looking to spend, or what are you hoping to find on deal, just to get some excitement around that. Or I might share lead up deals. I think that's a really good way too to start warming them up. And not like inundating with a ton of sales, but you can get on Amazon now and see things that are on sale. And then I might say like, oh, call it a lead up deal, on some of those bigger items to get people excited as well. So I feel like you can start sharing now anytime, and it doesn't have to be full on, but just little things maybe to get people excited, or sharing some stuff you got last year for Prime Day that you're still loving, or maybe what a top seller was, just some stuff to put those bugs in their ear.
No, I think that's a super good idea. And like what we see is like usually those top sellers that you found last year, they're going to be on deal again this year, right? Like there's going to be a robot vacuum. So I think that's a really good idea to kind of bring back like what you bought last year and kind of get that excitement going, because yeah, most of those top sellers will be on deal. Okay, that's super cool. And then in terms of like during Prime Day itself, like what type of content are you sharing with your audience? Are you going into like in depth like product reviews, like okay, I've got this, like here's more about it? Or is it more like this is my haul? Like how do you kind of balance the strategy for your audience over those 48 hours?
Yeah, I try to do a little bit of a mix so that it's not like all one thing. I find video really performs the best because people can see it in action, especially if it's something where you can show multiple ways to use it. So it's like the more that they can visualize using it in their home or wearing it, or like maybe it's beauty and you're showing like a get ready with me, they can picture it or see it in action. I think that helps. But obviously we can't just be showing video the entire time. So I also like to make collages, and I might put that up, like maybe for back to school. I would do like back to school and have like a bunch of items so they can scan and be like, oh yeah, backpack or a lunchbox or planner, you know. So I think that little mix, and sometimes static images too, especially for fashion. I feel like you could just show like a picture. So I like to do a variety, but I feel like video maybe performs the best.
Okay, and then you're putting that, because I was obviously looking at your profile quite a bit these last few days. So you're uploading then reels, right? And then
Yeah.
you're also putting those reels like on your story so that you're getting that like double engagement from your followers. Is that right?
Yeah, so I try to diversify as many platforms as you're on. I mean, don't feel like you have to start up a whole new one if you don't have anything yet. But yeah, so I will do with reels, I'll do some people will do hauls. I tend to not do a lot of hauls, but if you do those, I think that's perfect. Like sort of stick with what you're used to or what your audience is used to seeing. But I like will do for my reels maybe a roundup of a couple items versus just one thing, unless you're like, sure, that one thing is really gonna sell. But I might do themes. So maybe like my favorite cleaning gadgets or my favorite home ones, or kitchen finds or something like that, or travel, you know, whatever you feel like you could have like a theme around. So that sometimes helps. And then I'll share a reel on that, but then stories, I feel like I can also share the reel, but then other random things. I'll do a newsletter. So there I'll put collages together. I'll do a blog post. So then all the collages are there. And then it's like I'm linking back to my Instagram as well. And I feel like, you know, if you're on TikTok, you can make videos. If you're on Pinterest, you can post things, Facebook. So you can do all the things. But yeah, I would say whatever works for you ordinarily. Like I know some people who do hauls and I'm like, oh, this would be perfect for them. They can be like, what I got for Prime Day haul, and, you know, show a bunch of things. So I think anything where you can show multiple items is going to maybe be the best bet.
No, for sure, exactly right. And imagine if you're sharing like that hot ticket item that goes out of stock on the first day, right? Like you're gonna
Yeah.
want to have a backup.
Right.
And that's so cool. I didn't know you had like a newsletter. I'll be signing up, of course.
Yeah.
But do you do like all of this prep like in advance? I'm just thinking like you obviously have like a super busy life. Like you can't be doing so
Yeah.
much in those 48 hours. Like how are you kind of like managing your time? Like do you do
Right.
a lot in advance?
I do as much as I can in advance, but this is even something I've played around with over the years. First year, I did everything in advance of just like, you know, based on what I've seen, what I think is going to go on sale. The newsletter went out. But then, you know, if items fall off, things come on. And so sometimes that newsletter, not everything was on deal. And I was like, but you know, if you still work a full-time job outside of the home and like you're not going to be able to like do it all right then and there, then I say do that, prep it in advance and call it good. People will understand. And I always just preface everything by saying deals are subject to change. So people know, like, if there's something on there not on sale, not your fault. You didn't do it on purpose. Things just fall off. But then over the years too, what I've done, like last year, what I did was I got all of my like skeletons or my shells of things like formed, my collages, the titles. I don't say Prime Day on anything yet if I'm going to share it, but otherwise, in like idea lists, I start to build them, but I call them something else so that when it's live, it takes a couple minutes to go in and just add Prime Day to all those lists. And then they transfer over. And then I'll go through like my regular idea list, like so that morning when it goes live, and for us, it goes live at like 3 a.m. So I set my alarm and I get up because I'm a crazy person, but you don't have to do this. But like, I'll go into my idea list. I'll see the stuff that's on deal that maybe I didn't have in my Prime Day list, and I'll just transfer some over. And then for my newsletter, I have it all ready to go and some things on collages. But then in that like 11th hour, I'll see like, oh, this vacuum's on sale. I didn't know that. Okay. And I'll switch some things out on the collage and then send that. But again, I'm also like a last minute person and a procrastinator, so that works for me. If you're like, that gives me major anxiety, that's way too much on the day, I get that too. And I would just, yes, prep what you can and call it good. If stuff falls off deal, it's not the end of the world.
No, I think that's a really good tip, right? Like, because if you are balancing like a 9 to 5 alongside Prime Day, you can't just like drop everything, right? So this shows
Right.
that if you can do as much as you can in the build up, those 2 days don't have to be crazy.
Yeah.
And then maybe because I'm working on content, if we can talk about your storefront, my favorite topic.
Yeah.
So you mentioned idea lists. So how do you curate your storefront for those 48 hours? Like, are you focusing mostly on idea lists, shoppable photo, video? Where do they play into?
Yeah, I tend to do idea lists the most
Okay.
because I find like I always say that, idea lists are like putting somebody in a grocery store aisle versus like leading them just to the item. But I know plenty of people who do shoppable photos too. It's almost like how much you want to do in advance in way of video and photos. But the idea lists are nice too because you can really interchange them out. And then throughout the day too, you can be checking those lists, taking out things that aren't on deal, adding in new things that you find. So I try to create, a couple, not so overwhelming, maybe 4 to 5 themes, and then call them on Prime Day, switch them over, like Prime Day fashion, Prime Day home, kitchen, and then go in and make sure they're at the top of my storefront, that it's obvious where they are. And once you add things, they'll bounce up to the top. But I like to do that so that when they land on my storefront, it's obvious, like these are the Prime Day deals under this category, and it's as easy as possible because like a confused mind never buys. So if they're there and it's really obvious for them, I think that's going to be the best bet. So yeah, I feel like the idealists are the things you can sort of nurture throughout the days with Prime Day as things come on, because things will come on deal at different times. So you can just sort of watch that and update it. But then it's also just there when you are busy and can't be constantly sharing maybe to stories. You can say to people, go to my storefront, everything will be updated there, and then they can, navigate through there.
No, I think those are two super cool points, right? Like the pinning is really good. Like
Yes.
if you like it's straight away at the top of the storefront. If anyone hasn't tried it, you can pin. And then as soon as you land on Jill's storefront on Prime Day, you would see all of those lists that she's put together. So it's a really cool functionality. And I think the second thing, like you said, is like almost like training your audience, right? That like you're gonna be putting things on your storefront. Like they don't need to wait for you to put it on your stories or anything like this.
Right.
So if they want to find like what you're buying, like what you recommend, that it's all gonna live in the storefront. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. And I always make sure to let them know that. And I let them like sort of train them how to shop on the day. So because you'll be amazed at how many people are like, I don't understand what a link in bio is and where do I go? So it's like, I'll put a screenshot on my stories and be like, you're going to click this. That's going to go to my storefront. When you're there, see how everything's broken down by category. And you can even change your curations if you use those for those 2 days for all your curations to be Prime Day and then change them after. But right, so leading people there, and then I'll say to people, I'm going to be constantly updating my storefront, so then they know to like keep referring back if they're looking for something again, like in case I can't have everything on stories the whole time.
No, I think that's a super good tip. And I really like that about educating your audience. Like you wouldn't think, right? Like, because we're so like Amazon, Amazon, Amazon. Like I think I could order something in my sleep at this point. Like, that we don't really think. But I think that's a really good tip about that, like how to shop a storefront, right? I think that's cool. So definitely add to that pre-event work. Okay, so now we've captured your content. This is all sounding amazing. Maybe we can just talk about past Prime Days. Like, is there anything that's happened on a Prime Day where you've been like, oh my God, I need to remember this for next year? Or like, what are some of like your key learnings throughout the year, like in kind of those, like you said, you're focused on like lifestyle products and themes. Like, is there anything that you think like, oh, I wish I knew that 3 years ago?
Yeah, I would say in the very beginning with Prime Day, I was thinking you had to find brand new stuff. Like, oh, this is the time where I got to bring out things people have never seen before. And while I think that there's a time and place for that, if you find something new that you're like, oh, my audience is going to love this, and you can show excitement around it, then I think people are like, oh, that they're excited and it's on sale. That's a win. But I've also found that sometimes, like most of the time, what really performs are your best sellers or the things that you've been sharing throughout the year. And it honestly makes it easier on you because you've already shared this, you've shown work before, and your audience is primed already. They're warmed up to it. So I find that those do well because it's like, oh, that vacuum that Jill's been talking about all year, like now it's on sale. And you never know how many times people see and they just don't buy. They say it takes like 7 times for people to see something to buy it. So they've seen it throughout the year, but now that it's on sale, maybe they'll, add it to cart, like they'll take the plunge. So don't feel like you have to, comb through every little thing and find the best new thing. I think leaning into best sellers or what sells well or people will want really goes a long way, and it makes it a little easier on you.
Yeah, for sure. And would you say that's kind of like how you carved your niche? Like you said, like we were talking about now, like Prime Day is a crowded field, right?
Yeah.
Like is that what you would say, like kind of like knowing your audience and like having them trust you to find products that they know that you know they'll love? Is that how you've managed to kind of like carve a niche out in the busy market?
Yes, that's such a good question, such a good point. Because right, I feel like in the beginning, I could have shared anything because there weren't that many people sharing sales. So they're like, or sharing the Prime Day sales. So they're like, oh, I'll see what Jill has. I could have the gamut. And I still do. Like, I'll show fashion, I'll show beauty. But right, if they're like, I'm looking for a vac mop, I know Jill's gonna have that because that's like my wheelhouse, right? So I think they do come to you, like that's how you're really able to stand out among everybody selling, is if like you have your certain things that they know they can come to you for. But then you'll also have some other things sprinkled in, so you can be a little bit of a one-stop shop too. But it's like, they might know my one friend for fashion. So like they'll go to her for fashion stuff, they'll come from me for home. And that's sort of nice versus if you're all over the place, it might not stand out as much.
No, for sure. And I think also it plays into that whole part about being authentic, right? Like
Yeah.
for these events, you can, there's that viral clip of that influencer, right? Where she's showing like 20 different items in a second, right? Like, and you're
Yeah.
like, what's going on? Otherwise, like, how do you find it easy now to kind of keep an authentic kind of like presence during these sale events? Like, is that like, how are you kind of managing that during kind of when you know it's like 48 hours of like crazy sales? Like, how are you
Yeah.
maintaining authenticity?
Right. Yeah. I think staying true to a lot of the stuff you share or that you use. So maybe it's like, not something that's maybe my niche, but I'm talking about it all the time in stories. Like maybe it's a Mary Ruth's multivitamin, right? So it's like, oh, okay, she's always sharing that. So it's like my authentic stuff. And then what I find is if I'm going to bring in something that maybe isn't my wheelhouse, but it's like people have been asking for it, then I will allude to that. I'll say, like, oh, you guys were all asking for a chainsaw and like and I don't typically share that, but you wanted it, so I scoured it for you, here you go. And then maybe I'll put, like, if I had a bunch of people ask, I'll put those little bubbles, like I screenshot, I cut out their names, but I'll put it on the screen of stories and be like, so many of you wanted this, here's the best one I found. And that's where it's like asking your audience ahead of time what they want comes into play. But otherwise, yeah, I try to keep it as most to like either my niche or the things that like I use or would use. So it's not so out of left field and it
Mm.
looks genuine.
No, and that's cool. And in terms of like, because for me, like when it's Prime Day, I know for sure I can get a vacuum, right? Like, and I know there's going to be these items that are always on deal. Like I'm replacing like my pans, like storage sets. But how do you like also find those kind of like new items that drive excitement, right? Because every year there's like suddenly like a hot ticket item that will maybe only appear like in the second day. Is there anything you're doing to kind of like race to be like the first to find like new product, or is that not really part of your strategy?
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is such a good question because you're right. Like there is something where it's like if people want a robot vacuum, they're going to be able to go on Amazon and see that there's robot vacuums because there's stuff that's so popular. Everyone's going to be sharing it. It's going to be on Amazon's site. So like, yes, if I want some of those things that are more, they stand out, or I could say to people like, you guys are going to want to check back because I found some really cool new things. So in that instance, I will sort of comb through the Excel sheets, which I think you guys get, a little ahead of time, but that thing is a beast. So it's like, obviously to sit there and go through that whole thing is probably not, feasible. But I might start to go through my idea list because there are so
Okay.
many things that I'll see that maybe I shared like one time, or some stuff I never really shared, but it's cool. And I'm like, oh, that. And then you can go and search it in the Excel or search it like among some of the stuff like on Amazon to see, or keep it in the back of your mind for when everything goes live, then you can look for it. So some of those things, but yeah, it can be like tricky to find the new stuff. So as best as you can to search is like sort of what I would do, or I'll just go through my idea list and find those things that are not maybe like they're good and I love them and I've shared them, but they're not like the most popular thing that everybody's going to be sharing.
No, for sure. And are you ever like shopping yourself, like on Prime Day to inform your products? Like, are you like, oh my God, like I didn't even know this was on deal? And then, so will you also kind of like intraday be adjusting your idea list based on like actually what you've just discovered on site?
Yes, yeah, for sure. And because yeah, there's so much that I'll go through either my own idea list or maybe I'll be just looking on Amazon or other friends' idea lists and I'll see something and be like, oh my gosh, That's on sale. Okay, I know my people will love that. And even like I'll switch up sometimes. And again, depending on how in advance you get stuff done, I tend to do my reels like maybe that morning. I have an idea of what I'm gonna do, but I sort of wait to put them together to make sure that stuff's on sale if you have time to do that. And so maybe I'll switch something out and be like, oh, I was gonna show this vac mop, but everybody's showing the vac mop. So I'm actually gonna put in something else that I think they'll like, and it's a little more unique so that it stands out a little more.
No, that's super cool. I think also like reading the audience, right? Of like what everyone else is doing, what's being talked about. And then you can find out like, hey, I had this on my idea list. No one's talking about it. And maybe putting a spotlight on that, because then you're also going to have a bit more of a niche.
Right.
Okay, I like this. This is a cool tip. Okay, maybe I can ask about this question now about going beyond Prime Day slightly. So for me, like Prime Day, it's like 48 hours. There's so much anticipation. Like you guys are doing so much work in preparation. Then after it's over, like what happens? Like, like you probably gain, like, I'm guessing you gain quite, like you'll gain followers, right? Like if you're kind of, people are obviously searching Prime Day, like how are you kind of taking the momentum that you've gained from Prime Day and then applying it to kind of like the evergreen non-Prime Day days?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, it's so funny because I feel like Prime Day ends and it's like, like you relax. And then for my audience too, I feel like I chill out for like a day because they have just been inundated with sales and they're like, leave us alone. So I try to get back to like normal content. So then for those new followers, they're like, okay, this is what she's about. She sprinkles in some sales still or some Amazon stuff still. So then we get sort of back to that. But then the nice thing is, I do feel like Prime Day really sort of sets the stage then for the rest of the year and back to the next Prime Day, because now you know like what sold really well, what did people love. So throughout the year, then all the other sales that come up, then you're more prepared for those because you know, like, okay, this stuff did well. They'll probably be on sale for those sales or the holidays. But then it could just be a random Saturday. And maybe I happen to see that this one robot vacuum is on sale. And I could be like, you guys, that robot vacuum that was like the #1 seller at Prime Day, it's on sale today too. So then if they didn't get it for Prime Day, they can get it then. Or, I'll just like work stuff into my content throughout. So I feel like it really just lets you see what was popular and what people love on. So then going into the holidays, you can be sure to share that as well and work things into your content.
No, that's super cool. So you basically then, after the event, you do sort of like a deep dive of like, okay, I shared all of this stuff. And then, so then how are you doing that? Are you going into like your associate central saying like what generated commissions, clicks?
Yeah.
And then you'll save it. Like, how are you remembering? Or do you have kind of like an Excel that you're referencing? Like, this is super cool.
Yeah, so definitely I'll comb through my reports because I feel like they're really good at breaking it down on your back end at being like, you can break down like, yeah, what were my top sellers, what sold well. I mean, you'll also probably have a feeling based on what you share, maybe what did well if you look at clicks or things like that. But yeah, check your reports, see what sold well. And that's even like for this Prime Day, if you've done Prime Days before, you could go look at last year's reports and see like, oh, what sold, because there's times where I see and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that sold really well. I wasn't gonna even think of sharing it. So that helps. Shoot, I was gonna say something else now and I'm drawing a blank, but yes, I think, a lot of times what I'll do too is I'll say after the fact, like on stories, I'll ask people like, what did you guys buy? Like, what did you end up getting? And people will answer with something. And then I will like say, they're like, I bought the Ninja Creamy. I've been looking for that. I'll go find the Ninja Creamy. I take a picture, put the link up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I heard such good things about this, or I got this too. And then you drop the link for it then. Now, it might not be on sale, so it's a bummer. But if they see like, oh my gosh, everyone got that, that builds some excitement too. So asking people what they got, seeing if there's any reoccurring things like, oh, everybody got this one vac mop or, the Ninja Creamy. But then checking your reports and analytics will be huge too.
But I really like that. It's like you have a dialogue from before the event to after the event with your audience, right? Like you're kind of always in conversation with them. You're like, what do you want to see? What did you get? And then you're building those recommendations for them. Like it's really like you're meeting their exact needs. So that's super cool. Okay, and then so then for like do you have like a content calendar? So then like we know back to school comes up, then we obviously sometimes have that kind of Prime Day too, Black Friday, things like this, then the Christmas holidays. Are you kind of like making a plan for after Prime Day, like, okay, I gotta hit these events?
Yeah, it is funny because Prime Day really is the kickoff, and you're like, here we go. Like we're on the train and it's going now until January. So yeah, I'll start to be like, because we have to work so much in advance. So it's like this will be done, and then it's like, yeah, back to school will be the next big thing. Maybe like end of summer stuff. Not that they'll be buying much for that, but like people are gonna definitely be getting excited for fall. I know people are already pumped for fall and it's July, but they're so over the heat. So they're like, give me boots and sweaters. So looking ahead to that, like you said, Prime Day 2, basically, like whatever big fall sale they'll have. Black Friday, there's so many, Cyber Monday. So yes, I think like getting those on the calendar and then looking ahead, knowing, because I used to be really bad about it. I'd be like, oh, okay, Black Friday is this day. My brain's like, then you just have to prepare that day before. But it's like, oh my gosh, you have to be so in advance, and it makes your life easier to be that way. So I think, yes, you can start to then plot on your calendar knowing in advance. And I feel like once you do Prime Day, you can do any other sale. Like now you'll know what to do.
Prime Day is its own beast. Well, thanks so much, Jill. We actually timed that, I will say, pretty perfectly. So thanks so much for sharing all your insights and expertise. I learned a lot. I'm going to take these tips, so I hope everyone else does. And yeah, I'm sure you provided everyone with a really great foundation for their success during Prime Day. So I just want to say a huge shout out and a big thank you. And I also love that top, so I hope you're sharing a link on your stories later for us all to buy.
I will. It is Amazon. It's in my storefront under fashion finds.
Very good. Well, thanks so much, Jill. We'll now take a 5-minute break until Alan, my colleague, is going to host another amazing US influencer, What Grace For. So everyone grab a tea, go for a bathroom break. And thanks so much, Jill. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Good luck for Prime Day, everybody.
Thank you, Jill. Bye.